I'm Liz Hirsch-Naftali, and welcome to the Capital Coffee Connection podcast. And I am really excited because today we have a really special guest. The purpose of this podcast is to actually be able to meet with elected leaders and really learn about their heart and their humanity. We will not be talking about politics or policy. And my goal is for folks out there to listen, learn, and actually get to know who our elected leaders are. And through stories, actually see that we have so much more in common. And by learning about each other, we can actually do so much more together. So I was thinking about the Congresswoman who I'm going to be speaking with, and she's from Toledo, Ohio. And Toledo's a city that I've heard about my entire life. And I didn't realize that Toledo was the glass city. It's not just the glass capital of the country, but it's the glass capital of the world. And not just glass that we see, on windows, but all forms of glass. But then I was also thinking, I grew up watching the TV show MASH.
Yes.
And Klinger was from Toledo, Ohio, and he kept talking about it with such enthusiasm. And I just always heard Toledo. And then was thinking about Batman and Robin. And Batman would always say, Holy Toledo as Robin would say, Holy Toledo to Batman. So we are going to find out a little bit about all this today. But first, I would like to properly introduce Congresswoman Marcy Kaptur, who represents Ohio's 9th Congressional District. And you've been doing this for a few years.
For a few years.
And your district includes Toledo east to Cleveland, Erie, Ottawa counties, parts of Cuyahoga, Lorain, and Lucas counties.
Well, they've changed it again.
Again. Okay.
Again. So
what are your counties? Because I think it's important.
Toledo is the center.
Okay.
But now our district, they've taken Cleveland away and Lorain away, which it sounds simple, but it takes part of your heart away, really.
Yeah.
And they put you in another area. The state of Ohio legislature does this just to make life difficult. And we have about 8 counties now, and they're not all along the lake, though they largely drain into Lake Erie. And it goes all the way to the Indiana border. So we have Fulton, we have Williams County. To the east, we have Ottawa County, Erie County, Sandusky County, part of Wood County.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And of course, Lucas County is the big county.
Yeah.
So we have to introduce ourselves to new people and try to absorb what is happening in those communities. And it's different in each one.
I'm sure. New people to meet and new people to introduce yourself to.
Yes.
So I was joking when I said a few years. How many years have you been a congressperson?
I have been in office now 41 years. This is my 41st year. I'm the senior woman in the House.
Right.
And the longest serving woman in the history of both chambers.
Wow. That's pretty impressive.
That still doesn't match many of the men. I'd have to go another couple decades. But nonetheless, for a woman, it is an achievement.
Thank you for doing that.
Thank you. It's been a privilege.
Yeah. So let's just look up. We'll keep going, but let's go back to talk about growing up, because you grew up in Ohio, in Toledo, and talk about your parents, because I think that you're Polish descent.
Yes. Second generation.
Second generation. And what was it like to grow up and your parents were immigrants?
Grandparents.
Your grandparents were immigrants.
Grandparents were immigrants, and it was a tough life. They didn't have it easy. They came at the turn of the century, but they were very enterprising. On our dad's side, they didn't really speak English, but they ran a little grocery store.
Of course.
And then our dad and mom did that when my brother and I were growing up, my brother Steve. So we grew up in a family market. It was just such a great childhood. Oh my gosh. We got to go everywhere with Dad. Mom would bake pies. Everything was homemade. The Jewish baker he would bring the rye bread. We would go to the German meat store and get some of the German meats, right? Dad would work with all the local farmers. So in looking back at my own life, I think it became very easy to meet people because he took us everywhere with him. I had a truck called Old Reliable. We used to bounce around on the rural roads.
I love it.
It was so wonderful, but it was such hard work. And
your parents worked hard, and in some cases they had 2 jobs, I understand.
Absolutely. Neither of them, Dad didn't graduate from high school, nor Mom. So I was the first person in our family to go to high school, and they invested in our educations. Mom went on Social Security, and when she did, she finished her high school degree. She got her GED, and she should be in Congress, not me.
Yeah.
And our dad, I couldn't say he loved politics, but he paid attention. He always read the papers. And when the conventions were on TV, he would put me on his lap. And even though I didn't know what was going on, I knew it was important because he did it. He watched it. So they were very, very attuned to what was happening outside the life of their family, even though they didn't have high school educations even. They were very well read.
They were curious. They were thoughtful.
Intellectually curious. Dad traveled, all of his brothers, I mean, they were all veterans. Dad was not a veteran. He was the youngest of 16. So he wasn't drafted. He just made it, but all the other brothers, way back to the Bolshevik Revolution, one of our Marine uncles was shipped off to White Russia. And so we learned about what was happening in the world through the lives of our families. We had World War I veterans, World War II veterans. We had Vietnam veterans. We had Korean War veterans. We had all these relatives.
Amazing.
And so
serving our country.
Serving our country. And I remember one uncle who, oh God, he was such a brave soldier. And he was in the OSS, and he was over in Asia and in Burma. And I remember I said, Uncle Tony, how did you have the courage? He goes, hey, when you land in a parachute and you hit the ground and they start shooting, you start shooting back. And he said, as a young child, it was like, wow. And he had good jokes. He was always of such good humor. And he had illnesses, malaria and so forth. His hands would shake from serving in our country. And I just couldn't get enough of what they had to tell me, what they taught me about the price of liberty.
That's not anything you can get in a formal education.
I got none of that in a formal education. Yes, I studied in college. I could read about it. But what they gave and what the wounds they brought home, and that they never dwelt on those, that they led constructive lives. Uncle Skip, he couldn't hear, but I could. It was from being a D-Day.
Right.
And what he went through, the suffering, they never really talked about that. But as I've grown older, I thought, oh my goodness, what they saw, Uncle Pete would sing songs to us from World War I, and what he endured. And they would make fun of it.
Mm-hmm.
But then when you really understood what they did, it was like they hid it from us. But I learned so many lessons from them. Yeah, so we have a very patriotic family.
So I have a question. Based on that, you also wanted to serve, and you tried to join the Air Force, and I understand that you were rejected because you were a woman.
Correct. I grew up during the 60s, and nobody in our family had ever gone to college. And at the high school I went to, St. Ursula Academy in Ohio, we had career day, and we would meet all these people. And so I decided to enlist in the Air Force and to go to college. I got a letter back saying that, well, good luck, but we don't admit women, Oh, okay. So then I applied to be in the FBI. I got rejected because I was a woman. Yeah. And in going to college, I tried to get into Notre Dame University in those days because Dad knew there was a football team. So he figured, he'd come and see me and go to the football game. But they rejected me because I was a woman. And so, it's like boom, boom, boom. But the people of Wisconsin, University of Wisconsin, they helped give me a scholarship, and I went to the University of Wisconsin. So the Midwest, the Great Lakes people helped me, and I try to help them because they invested in me.
Yeah, and I think that brings up a really interesting point because a lot of women today, young women, don't realize the amount of people, the amount of organizations, universities, and our military that were rejecting women.
Yes.
And it wasn't that long ago. It's in our lifetimes. And so I think that's why it's important to bring up these stories, which is that we cannot rest on our laurels, and we have to know what was fought for and to appreciate it, to keep fighting for more. And it's not a political thing. It's just about women having rights.
Right. And understanding that you can grow to your full potential. When I became a member of Congress, we're allowed to make recommendations to the service academies. And the first person I appointed was a young woman from Toledo, Annalise Steele, who went on to be a captain in the U.S. Army and traveled the world and did very well. So now about 20% of our military is comprised of women.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Just staying on the military, because I think there's another story which is important, is the work you did for the National World War II Memorial in D.C. And could you talk about it? Because it was one of your constituents that was the reason for it or the impetus for it?
Yes, I was at a fish fry for township trustees when I was first elected. This was during the 1980s. And a voice, I was holding my plate of fish to go take my seat, and this voice rang out across the crowd saying, Congresswoman Kaptur, why is there no World War II memorial in Washington, D.C.? And I thought, where is that voice coming from? And I looked in the distance, and here was this gentleman with spectacles with silver rims.
Yeah.
And he was like, you look like a bulldog. And I said, and everybody in the room stopped talking, and they focused on me. And it was like, oh my goodness. And I said, well, sir, I believe there is one. He goes, oh yeah, what? And I said, Iwo Jima. He goes, wrong. That's to one branch, one service, and one battle. And I said, well, now, wait a minute. Arlington, there must be. He goes, no. I've been all around the world.
He had done his homework.
He had been everywhere in the world. He was a World War II vet who had served under Patton at the Battle of St. Lo in tank command. He had a gruff nature, but he had a golden heart.
And his name I wrote down is just correct, Roger Durbina.
Durbin. Roger Durbin.
Roger
Berkey,
Durbin.
Ohio.
Okay.
Berkey, Ohio, which is west of Toledo, in my home county. And so an idea, this is how Congress should work. A person gives a member an idea, a constituent, and the member thinks, there might be merit to that idea. It took us 16 years from 1987 until 2004 to dedicate. That's a whole book of aggravation and different things that happened. But we finally did it, and today now, 95 million people have gone to that memorial. So this idea that came from a constituent became the most important memorial in the nation's capital to the greatest generation. I like to call them the most unselfish generation.
I hear you. And that's kind of what the purpose of what we're trying to talk about is, like, people to understand that actually, again, it doesn't matter if you had been a Republican or a Democrat. If you were a real good leader and somebody came to you and said, hey, there isn't this, and you then were maybe 16 years later able to bring it to fruition. And it is one of those things that people, when they go to DC, that is one of the first things they take children, young people, old people, they go to see. So I just like that there's this story that actually starts with somebody in Ohio, and that he was smart enough and he got you at that fish fry.
Right. He'd been a letter carrier for 30 years, and and I was a history major, and so I thought, well, I knew how much merit that had, but I couldn't believe it was missing.
Yeah.
And then I thought, that's my generation's job to pay tribute to them.
And for then other generations now to be able to learn and to understand.
Yes, and that's one part of the memorial that's still missing. One of the pieces I couldn't get done, there were two pieces I couldn't get done, and one was a place on site where people who came could learn not just that the war was fought and how many states and territories participated, but the reason for the war, what we fought against. It is a memorial to the victory of liberty over tyranny in the 20th century, but that is not well expressed on site. No. And that still bothers me. I'm still working after all these years.
You have to keep going.
I have to keep going. We got to get this done.
Yeah. Well, it's a good story. Now, I have a question, which is, you are Roman Catholic. And I just wonder, this isn't about religion, but this is about faith, my question. Because you had said the Roman Catholic faith is a central pillar for my being, particularly as an American of Polish heritage.
Yes.
What does that mean? Because I think sometimes religion has been, taken off to mean something that people go, oh, wait. But I believe, and I've been talking with other electeds, and their faith is really important to who they are as leaders.
Yes. Well, my faith grounds me in a certain philosophy. I don't try to push it. I just live by it. And Poland was a country that became the first place in Europe to outlaw serfdom. In the 1700s, after Tadeusz Kościuszko and Kazimierz Pulaski came to America and helped Washington win the revolution, the American Revolution. So they went back to Europe, Kościuszko, and he helped in a place called Połaniec, Poland, to draft the Połaniec Declaration to outlaw serfdom. And for that crime, Poland was taken off the map of Europe until after the First World War for 125 years because he wanted to bring freedom, to not have slavery, to not have serfdom in Europe. And so the country was divided between three adjoining nations and was not united until after World War I, when Woodrow Wilson placed Poland back on the map of Europe. But then Poland was, the people there spoke three languages. They were just raising their next generation of citizens. And it wasn't such an easy period of time in which to live. And then in 1939, they were invaded on September 1st by the Nazi Reich, and then 3 weeks later by Soviets, by Stalin. And then they fell under subjugation until 1989, when they became, through solidarity and through decades of repression, the first country to tripwire the fall of the Soviet Union. This is all in me, that understanding, and also the heritage of my own family. The Franciscan heritage is very important to me. Our dad's oldest sister was a Franciscan until age 95, and the philosophy of the Franciscans, I hope, imbues the denomination I'm a member of with full meaning. And it's a different, very earth in universe calling, and service to all. Service to all. And
which is actually what a leader should be, service to all.
Right.
Because somebody may not vote for you, but once you're elected, you are then serving that person. So your service is to all.
Right.
And to children, especially who can't vote. I always think about that as like something that, our elected leaders are, is like, they're not voted on by little kids, but you really are, at the end of the day, that's who you're thinking about, their well-being now and their well-being in the future.
Nancy Pelosi always would say, for the children.
For the children, exactly. So let me ask you this. What is the best advice you've ever received? What is the worst advice? I'm sure there's plenty of both.
I haven't thought about that one. Well, I have a lot of sayings from our own family, from our mother. Thirst for knowledge. Thirst for knowledge. That was very important. Very well read, very thoughtful individual, beautiful handwriting, beautiful composition.
Nice.
And from our father, some advice like, it's not how much you make, it's how much you save. And so Dad was very conscious of, don't overextend yourself, very thrifty, very conscious of holding it together. And they, bought the first home, the first property our family had ever owned. Yeah. Mom had been in 13 different homes as a kid. I mean, she was in the same family, but they rented, they didn't have permanent shelter. And so all of that history is in my mind as a member, and I see so many of the families I represent in the same situation. So I think that advice was very good advice. Yeah. Sayings like, the strongest steel goes through the hottest fire. Yeah. There are just lessons of life that they shared.
And, you also said at one point, and this I think goes along with that, is I grew up in a house where our mother made our clothing. We didn't have a lot of money, so we learned how to scrimp, and we learned how to invent, how to create, and those are learned skills. And that kind of message keeps coming back with how you were raised and the life you've lived.
Yes, and certainly for my brother, who can't be here today with us, but he became an inventor, and he filed a patent, and he had the fastest time in racing. He built his own cars, built his own engines. Wow. He was so gifted. And I say I'm the only member of Congress that has a Bridgeport mill in our garage because of all of his work and what he tried to do. For me, if I weren't doing this job, I would be doing 7,000 other things, including I'd probably own a Polish bakery in Toledo and bring recipes back that I truly appreciate that I don't see much on the shelves anymore.
Yeah, interesting. So where does the Holy Toledo come from?
Boy, that's
because I looked at it and there's a lot of different interpretations.
Well, I think maybe Danny Thomas helped with that because Danny Thomas was from Toledo and he was a movie star. And he used to always say on his program, Holy Toledo. Now, I don't know if he's the one that started, I really don't know. But Toledo's motto is to work, laborare, and to pray. Orare, to work and to pray. And in many ways, work is a prayer.
Yeah.
And so the motto kind of fits with that Holy Toledo slogan.
Interesting. Because it is part of our common expressions.
Yes.
And people, I don't think, have any idea why they're saying it, by the way. But it just gets said. Okay, so I'm going to just sort of switch it up to some quicker questions just to get to know you. And you can answer with one word or you can elaborate. But we'll call this like the rapid questions, but I won't be that rapid.
Hope I can remember the answers.
Yeah, you will. What is your favorite sound?
The wind.
Ah, nice. What is your favorite color?
Pink.
What is your favorite smell?
Coffee cake.
I knew it was going to be a bakery. I knew it would be a bakery item. Coffee cake. Is it the cinnamon?
It's a Polish coffee cake. It doesn't have a lot of cinnamon except on the topping, but it's just this rich, wonderful smell of the earth that comes from the oven.
I love
yeast.
Yeah. Who would you say has been your biggest cheerleader in your life?
Oh, our family. Mother and father.
I'm sticking with food. You get to a desert island and you can only have one meal. What would it be?
Oh my goodness, spaghetti.
Okay. What kind of sauce? Just curious, since we're on
Marinara, probably. Maybe some hamburger in it. But
okay.
meatballs sometimes, but not always.
I'm getting this from you that you have a lot of interesting qualities. What would you call your superpower?
Getting things done.
So that's your superpower, getting things done, even if it takes 15 or 16 years and you're still working on it.
I am.
I love that. Do you have a quote or a mantra that you live by that like you keep saying? I know you have some from your family, your parents, but in your own.
Just live your life for others.
You probably have traveled a lot, but where is like in the world have you not been that you would love to go?
I don't think I'd be a good person in outer space. I don't think I'd really be good at that.
So you're not signing up for one of those.
But but in terms of global travel, I've traveled a great deal. Boy, that's a really hard question for me. I don't care for being underwater for a long time. Don't really care for that, so I don't think that the deep seas would be on my list there. Well, I'll tell you, one of the best trips I ever took was to Switzerland, and walking among the gardens that they had planted, their vegetable fields were beautiful. Yeah. So it would be some place where people were growing plants and where there was a lot of tending to the earth. I think those places interest me. This is
nature.
Yes, nature.
Going back to your district, which I know is both sides of Toledo, what is special about the people and what is special about that area for you?
They're kind. There's an ethic that operates when people come to our area, in general, of Northwest Ohio in particular. Mm-hmm. And I think it's because of the various religious groups that have settled there over the years of all denominations, they have created an ethic that you can feel and see evidence of. I'm not saying we have a perfect place, that's for sure, but there is a giving spirit and a kindness that I don't find in other places. For instance, here in Washington, you come out of a gas station and no one waits for you to come out onto the street. They run you right over. If you come to Toledo, someone will stop and they'll let you go out. That's the difference. Mm-hmm. That still operates. There's a kindness.
I like that very much. It's a kindness. So I'm going to go into our last question, which is sort of based on that. And I think you've talked a lot about it indirectly, but the last question that I've asked leaders is, what is your definition of joy? What brings you joy? And then if you are joyful and you share that joy with others, what does that feel like and what does that look like?
Well, there's all kinds of joy. I think we live in a society where there's a lot of battering, right? There's a lot of sounds. You can hardly go to any place where there isn't a sound. There's no quiet. Mm-hmm. I like the quiet of nature and the power of nature.
And wind.
So that gives me joy. I like to watch the earth come alive in the spring, all right? I like to watch bees. I like to get in with the tempo of nature. There's a book written, A Last Child in the Woods. I worry about our children because they're bombarded with too many stimuli, and they are not at once with nature. And nature has a power much bigger than anything we could create, right? And so I think one thing we should do is encourage activity that moves children back into nature. That book, Last Child in the Woods, perfectly describes what's going on. And it used to be, we welcomed nature. We went into nature. We were taught about it. We learned about the environment. Now many children are afraid of it. When I take some children to the Great Lakes, they're afraid of the water. Okay, well, they have to be taught about waves. They have to be taught about water. They have to be. So I think we have to think hard about helping people be steady in their lives by emulating the pace of nature and not be impatient and gain strength through symmetry with it. I think that there's a disconnect in this modern age with nature, and I think it's not healthy.
Interesting. Well, I appreciate that because I've not heard that take on it, but yet I really do think that you are right, which is there is a joy to some of the most simple things and things that we have in nature, but we're so busy texting and calling and doing that we sometimes forget to actually just put the electronics and put the stimuli aside and just enjoy and put ourselves in places that are stimulating, and that is joyful. Yes. And I actually think when people have that opportunity, they go back and they actually are kinder and softer, and they are not as wound up. Right. And as we wind up on our final moments, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for coming. Thank you for all you have done for this country, for your state, and for women. And I think about where you were rejected and you just kept going. And they didn't take you in those places, but you showed them, and you were the longest serving Congresswoman. And that is really impressive. And I hope that young men and young women who are listening understand really what an accomplishment that is. And that is really special. And that is, I hope, what people will understand is special about our country, that we have that ability, but we just have to keep pushing forward.
There'll be always somebody that catches your ball. There will always be somebody, another window opens, another window, and it just happens in life. And you have to follow your passion. I always say to the young people, it's surprising because, I say, if nobody in your family ever played the flute and you really want to do that, you do that. Exactly. And they're like surprised, and to talk to them and what do you really want to do? What? And they're, struggling with that, and find your passion. Yeah. And you will be successful.
I agree. We're going to stop on that because that's the best line to end. Thank you so much. Thank you. Hi, it's Liz. Please join me every Tuesday for coffee to talk about heart and humanity with our elected leaders. Ciao.